I'm Lauren Booth. Welcome to CinePolitics, the show that gets right to the heart of the most exciting and important political and social films from around the world. On today's programme, we'll be discussing Unlawful Killing. This has caused quite a stir at the Cannes Film Festival already this year. It's described by director Keith Allen as an inquest into the inquest of Princess Diana. The film is currently not allowed to be screened in the United Kingdom. Unlawful Killing explores the possibility that Princess Diana may have been murdered by the British establishment. It also looks at what cover-ups could have taken place after the crash if this had been the case.
In 1997, the death of a princess and her lover rocked the world. 10 years later, it led to the longest, most expensive and most sensational inquest in British legal history. Hundreds of witnesses were called. There were arguments, lies, tears and accusations, as intimate details of their private lives were dissected on the world stage. Yet before the court case had even begun, the media had already decided what the verdict should be. However, in Britain and around the world, millions of ordinary people were convinced, and after the inquest still are convinced, that the deaths of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed were no accident.
In my opinion, there can be no doubt that she was actually murdered.
When the woman left a note saying, FYI, if I'm dead, here's how it's going to happen, and then it happens exactly like that, I think someone should pay attention.
I mean, I just know our initial reaction was, well, they finally killed her, because we're used to it.
I think it was murder.
If you go to a bar, you'll find three people who go, ooh, but the royals did it, didn't they?
Oh, of course Diana was bumped off. She knew she was going to be bumped off.
I wasn't sure if Diana's death was an accident or murder, but I suspected a cover-up by the British establishment, an elaborate exercise in burying the truth rather than uncovering it. I suspected a conspiracy, but this isn't just the old story about a conspiracy before the crash. It's about a conspiracy after the crash.
We all know that the biggest scandals are always the cover-ups. I mean, it isn't the Watergate, it's not the break-in, it's the cover-up which is the big scandal.
When you had the head of the British security services calmly announcing we have never killed anybody in the last 50 years, I laughed out loud. What's the point of them then? I didn't believe it. And so if you don't believe that, where does that leave the rest of the establishment evidence?
I decided to watch and wait, then tell the story that the press and TV news wouldn't tell. The result is a documentary that reveals what really happened during those 6 months in the Royal Courts of Justice. It is the inquest of the inquest.
Well, the jury's verdict at that inquest was unlawful killing, in part by the driver of the vehicle who was drunk and speeding, and also by the paparazzi chasing Diana in the car. But there are those who believe this is not the whole truth. Well, here to discuss these issues are the author and journalist Noel Botham. Noel wrote The Murder of Princess Diana, and Tessa Mays, who is a writer and film director. A very warm welcome to you both.
Hello.
Let's begin, Noel, with you. I mean, the question I want answers is, why wasn't this just an expensive documentary filmed for British TV?
They tried very hard, I'm told, to get various television companies involved in this and interested. They all turned it down. Not one company, not one major newspaper, not one major magazine would back the making of any kind of programme or documentary or written documentary of a cover-up.
See, that seems extraordinary. Tessa, you make films and you work on documentary theses. Would you find that surprising that every aspect of Diana's life seemed to be open to public scrutiny, but her death was a closed shop too? Does that sound right to you?
No, because there's been a number of very, very good investigative documentaries, notably Martin Gregory's documentary, that did look at the details close hand and scrutinise some of the leading witnesses and some of the evidence that hadn't come out yet. So I wouldn't say that it's been a closed shop, far from it. In fact, there's a number of documentaries. Not only that, the media has endlessly over the last 10, 15 years tried to look repeatedly at causes of death at sort of different conspiracy theories, some newspapers asking the public, do you think she was killed, and sort of fueling a great bubble of curiosity into speculation, really, often beyond what the facts actually are, which is that, very tragically, she was killed by a drunk driver.
Noel, let's look at the non-release of this film in the United Kingdom anyway. British censors and legal minds say it would take 87 cuts to the film in order to pass it for British showing. In the US, 1 cut would need to be made. What does this say to you? What sort of cuts would they need to make?
Well, they're probably talking an awful lot about British people in there, therefore the libel would be on British people. In America, these people would not be at the same risk of being liable. So I would imagine this is one of the strong points. May I also add here that there was a third verdict from the jury, that of unlawful killing because of other vehicles following Diana's car. Apart from the paparazzi and the drunken driver, that was also mentioned by the jury.
And not really made a feature of somehow. It's only because people only remember the unlawful killing verdict.
Totally ignored, particularly by the BBC, totally ignored really by the newspapers, because of course the jury were referring to the Fiat Uno, the small white car, which had pulled out in front of Diana's car moments before she entered the tunnel.
Well, I know we're going to come to that in a second. We will see a clip of that, I believe, in the cuts in a second. You wrote a book, The Murder of Diana. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
And did you? What walls of silence, if any, did you come across?
Enormous, in England and in Paris. When I first started to write this book, I thought I was writing a book on an accident. I told my publisher, do you really think it's worth doing this book because it's just an accident? But the more you ask simple questions, and the more you've got these very strange answers that didn't tie in with it being an accident. For example, why, in the whole of Paris, were all the CCTV cameras turned off just on that route from the Ritz Hotel to the Alma Tunnel, by some strange coincidence?
I think that's a very good place to come back to you on, because we're ready for another short clip exclusive for this show, which asks the question, why were no members of the royal family summoned to testify either?
The inquest was held in the royal family's own court, so is it any wonder that the coroner, the royal representative in charge, decided that the key royal suspects need not even appear at the inquest to be questioned?
Right from the inquest's first day, I thought, what if this woman's name had been Diana Smith, and she'd written in a note which had been subsequently unveiled, my husband Charles Smith wants me to die in a car accident, and subsequently she did. In any other family or in any other country, surely Charles Smith would have been called to the witness stand at the inquest into his wife's death.
Well, let's ask you that. Tessa, what do you feel about that question? Should the royal family have been asked, any members of it, to the inquest?
There was evidence directly leading to suspect that they had murdered someone, then obviously yes, but that is not the case here. You know, it's all very well for people to speculate based on the musings of a woman who sadly said all kinds of things before she died, but that isn't actually necessarily firm evidence for the police or anyone else to start asking questions. They did interview, for example, her butler, and even wanted his private diaries during the inquest, which suggested the inquest itself wasn't very rigorous and was more of a sort of showcase for all kinds of conspiracy theories itself. This is a major problem, I think,
well, that's interesting.
In our society, to have major figures of the establishment fueling conspiracy more than sticking to the facts of what can be proven, not just what can be speculated upon.
So a couple of points raised there, Noel, that I'm sure you'll want to address. The first is, what was the point of the inquest?
I think really that they should have appeared, some members of the royal family, because Prince Charles is one day going to be king. Diana's son is one day going to be king. I think just for the health of the British people, he really should have put this all to rest and said, no, this is absolute nonsense. It had nothing to do with the royal family. This is quite ridiculous
But
as far as I'm concerned. He should have actually got into the witness box and made that statement.
Tessa does raise a good point. This wasn't a criminal investigation. There were no criminal charges brought because there wasn't thought to be a case. So there was an inquest, a real showcase, just to tell the public that nothing was going on. Isn't that what this was?
But an inquest brings about a verdict which says whether it's a criminal situation or not. You don't get that until the end of the inquest.
And it was unlawful killing, Tessa. It was unlawful killing. But no one was ever brought forward for any charges.
Well, he was dead. He's a drunk driver and he's dead. And it is very, very tragic, you know. I remember on the day myself thinking, well, I'm a Republican, but, you know, it's very, very sad nevertheless. But I do think that this is not just a problem to do with speculation over Diana's death, but in wider society. There is a great mistrust these days of officialdom, of the establishment, even of politicians that we elect. And as a result, we're doing ourselves a disservice when we just disbelieve everything and believe nothing. And I think we have to, at some level, decide that certain things are factually true until proven otherwise, 100%. Not just in a speculative way. And I say that as an investigative journalist who, of course, we want to question, and like you as well, you know, I want to follow leads and find the evidence. But until you actually get the evidence, that's all these things are. They're questions with certain levels of evidence that are merely hearsay, not necessarily absolute proof that something happened.
But why have they never found the driver of the Fiat Uno?
These things happen. I agree. More sort of attention should be made to that.
I just wanted to ask,
until we have an answer.
Hang on, I wanted to ask.
Speculate.
Tess, 1 second. I wanted to go back to the letter, like you say, hearsay evidence, or the ramblings of a rather unwell woman. Was Diana just a paranoid who wrote down every thought in a rather childish, simplistic way to say, "I think my husband's going to kill me"? What does that really show?
I don't know whether she was paranoid or not. She certainly wasn't 100% normal. I don't think. Right. At the end, she'd been under enormous pressure for years, partly through her husband's bad behaviour and his affair with Camilla, which must have caused her tremendous problems.
But the prediction of her own death, should anything be read into that?
I'm not sure, quite frankly. Okay. I really don't know whether it was a piece of imagination or she actually overheard certain conversations in Kensington Palace or by. We'll never know. The trouble is.
Well, maybe our next clip will give us another clue, because this looks at a piece of evidence that may point to more sinister goings on.